In today's update, we're spotlighting the current leaders holding the #1 spot in Season of Discovery Phase 3. Playing as a Shaman spec tank, Nightsong has once again secured the top spot for an impressive 16th time. This player is a proud member of the Summers Guild on the Living Flame EU server and continues to dominate the leaderboards with their strategic play and tactical prowess. Hot on Nightsong's heels are several other notable players. The Warlock tank player Enigmexx and Hunter melee player Treeranger have both also held the 1 spot 16 times, showcasing their own exceptional skills and dedication to the game. Not far behind, we have the Druid Guardian player NMX and the Mage Arcane player Cuties, each holding the top spot 13 times. In the balanced Druid category, Fewool from Shadowstrike AU in the Guild Male models has taken the lead with a DPS of 1079.8, surpassing Sint from Wild Growth EU in the Guild Blessed X, who has held the top spot for the past 5 days with a consistent DPS of 1069.3. Innate from Crusader Strike US in the Guild Humbertism remains in the top 3 with a DPS of 1051.2. The remaining top 10 are Perrin, Hotmiss, Blazarus, Centripetal, Adriu, OK Bloomer, and BA Xiao Ba, each demonstrating impressive gameplay and stats in their respective guilds. In the Feral Druid category, Parsepolis from Living Flame EU in the Guild Silver Saga maintains the top spot for the 7th consecutive day with a DPS of 1466.8. BGTD from Living Flame EU in the Guild B Tribe holds the 2nd position with a DPS of 1453.6. And Lawsuit from Living Flame EU in the Guild Silver Saga rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1436.2. The remaining top 10 for today are Giny, Africantiger, Cyril, Swagdonald, Caddy Peas, Lilclaws, and Kates. In the Guardian Druid category, NMX from Lone Wolf US in the Guild Chinese Textile Machine continues to hold the top spot for the 5th consecutive day with a DPS of 848.2. Following closely behind is Kildre Puli from Living Flame EU in the Guild Sapan Kalasura, maintaining the 2nd position with a DPS of 831.1. Cadet from Living Flame EU in the Guild B Tribe rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 823.2. The remaining top 10 for today are Suduapjit, Ankler, Minatus, Saiju, Yuanfeng, Pompex, and Giny. In the Melee Hunter category, Treeranger from Living Flame US in the Guild Cartel continues to dominate with a DPS of 1556.9, maintaining the top spot for over a week now. Close behind, we have Olgi from Living Flame EU in the Guild Den Dansky Meadow with a DPS of 1514.9, and Johnny Sins from Lone Wolf EU in the Guild Oxygen with a DPS of 1507.9. These 3 players have consistently shown exceptional performance. The remaining top 10 for today are Resorth, Yangla Chi-Chi, Zatara, Cornshot, Minyaros, Wafflefreeze, and Tenakyu. In the Ranged Hunter category, Isoled Out from Crusader Strike US in the Guild Foot Long Party Dogs, Sod continues to dominate with a DPS of 1432.2, maintaining the top spot for the 3rd consecutive day. Close behind, Tubba Lumpkin from Living Flame US in the Guild Smooth holds steady in 2nd place with a DPS of 1349.7. Rounding out the top 3 is Fragmaster from Living Flame EU in the Guild B Tribe, delivering a DPS of 1338.6. The remaining top 10 for today are Bumrush, Mihirith, QIA, CDI, Disio, Floorberries, Locky, and Potato Pilot. In the Arcane Mage category, Musakas from Lone Wolf in the Guild, I'm Not Sure continues to dominate with a DPS of 726.1, holding the top spot for the 3rd consecutive day. Digidoo from Wild Growth, part of the Guild Resist, follows closely with a DPS of 677.4, while Cuties from Living Flame holds the 3rd position with a DPS of 631.4. The remaining top 10 for today are Miuju from Gu Lang, Sea Mage from Lone Wolf, and Waxo from Crusader Strike, Dezipionad from Lone Wolf, Greats from Living Flame, Kusin from Living Flame, and Mylene from Lone Wolf. In the Fire Mage category, Delano from Crusader Strike US in the Guild Parse maintains his top position for the 5th consecutive day with a DPS of 1195.3. Following closely, QIA Jujia Yi from Yexingquan UTW in the Guild Yuan Qi holds the 2nd spot with a DPS of 1177.8. Mellowish from Wild Growth US secures the 3rd spot with a DPS of 1158.8. The remaining top 10 for today are Tumu Charmer, Corbs, Duchanum, Magisula, Pdim, Cest, and Maltazar. In the Frost Mage category, Watch Tome from Lone Wolf EU continues to hold the top spot for the 7th consecutive day, with a DPS of 1039.4. Following closely in second place is Obi from Living Flame EU in the Guild Link logs with a DPS of 991.9, and Clankum from Living Flame US rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 987.5. The remaining top 10 for today are TDMZ, Triepo, Shengmingyu Nizianmei, Joboshi, Kuwekwiyu, Kuwekwi, Sadik. In the Protection Paladin category, the top 3 players remain unchanged. Hiermei Sai from Shangming Lai Yan TW in the Guild Chuanchang continues to hold the number 1 spot with a DPS of 1,237.7, a position he's maintained for over a week. One Punch from Living Flame US in the Guild Cartel follows closely with a DPS of 1,229.3, and Fakyaz from Lone Wolf US in the Guild Lethal rounds out the top 3 with a DPS of 1,221.3. The remaining top 10 players for today are Farvold Boysuthik Fat and Ming Duz Gaunt and Meng Yu Fuguang. In the Retribution Paladin category, Kui Yu from Shengming Lai Yan TW maintains the top spot with a DPS of 1,429.4, holding this position for 2 consecutive days. Milocyrus from Living Flame EU in the Guild Pepitant has climbed to the 2nd spot with a DPS of 1,376.8, pushing Pettery from Wild Growth EU in the Guild Dragonslayers with a DPS of 1,372.8 to the 3rd position. The remaining top 10 for today are Tyrion Polduring, Akanos, Elvshapo, Gi Ziju 7th, Mu Lingzhu, Henjiao Dadaju Hua, and Genix. In the Shadow Priest category, Waga from Living Flame EU in the Guild Link logs continues to dominate the leaderboard, maintaining the top position with a DPS of 948.9 for the past 6 days. Close behind, Ajahalp from Living Flame EU in the Guild Esherovers holds the 2nd spot with a DPS of 942.6. Rounding out the top 3 is Flayed from Shadowstrike AU, .U.S in the Guild Male Models with a DPS of 940.6. The remaining top 10 for today are Smor, Theradrin, Tisania, Kasupo, Valinor, Casemax, and Aoxy. In the DPS Rogue category, Body Snatcher from Shadowstrike in the Guild Fatality continues to dominate with a DPS of 1,507.1, holding the top spot for a remarkable 6 consecutive days. Close behind, Zhushui Dai from Shengming Lai Yan in the Guild Chuanchang maintains the 2nd position with a DPS of 1,498.6. Rounding out the top 3 is Fang Xiao Yu from Shengming Lai Yan, delivering a DPS of 1,494.9. The remaining top 10 for today are Karina from Godoan Nogde, Sylvie from Living Flame, Tiriela from Living Flame, Shrai from Living Flame, Reminder from Living Flame, Reminder from Living Flame, Narange from Godang Nogde, and Rotterdam from. In the Tank Rogue category, Nerf Assassin from Gulang TW in the Guild Nerf Shadow Club continues to hold the top position with a DPS of 1,096.4, a position he's held steadfastly since April 29, 2024. Nova from Living Flame EU follows closely in 2nd place with a DPS of 1,062.4. A new face in the top 3 today is Zombie from Wild Growth US with a DPS of 1,058.7. The remaining top 10 for today are Sketcher, Sion, Twisted Step, Dean P, Hakwin Wool, and Wangyamolrag. In the Elemental Shaman leaderboard, Bread Gloves from Shadowstrike AU in the Guild Male Models has taken the top spot today with a DPS of 1,235.8, surpassing Hexmother from Lone Wolf US in the Guild Hunks, who held the top position for 6 consecutive days with a DPS of 1,165.9. The 3rd spot is claimed by Bangog Dongsam Jumiog from Godoan Nogdik KR with a DPS of 1,115.0. The remaining top 10 for today are Gog, Philly, Needmilk, Liapirka, Lava Blurst, Elemental Man, and Nature Shock. In the Enhancement Shaman category, NA from Living Flame EU in the Guild Den Dansky Meadow continues to hold the top spot with a DPS of 1,596.9, a position he's held for the past 6 days. Coming in 2nd is Fakeban from Shadowstrike AU in the Guild Male Models, who has made a significant leap with a DPS of 1,566.4. Iopatisham from Lone Wolf US in the Guild Strictly Business maintains his position in the top 3 with a DPS of 1,550.6. The remaining top 10 for today are Bozzator, Zobe, Boinky, Balgundul, BDD, Cryptenhance, and Chod Handsometit. In the Tank Shaman category, Nightsong from Living Flame EU in the Guild Summers has held the top spot for over a week, maintaining a DPS of 1,147.5. Close on their heels is Iwo from Living Flame EU in the Guild Trash with a DPS of 1,123.4, who has shown a significant improvement since the start of the month. The third spot is held by Vistalo from Wild Growth EU in the Guild Conspiracy, delivering a DPS of 1,013.1. The remaining top 10 for today are Bjorgen, Shamsky, Walks, Koshaman, Gearshaman, Tyhex, and Salfar. In the DPS Warlock category, Taco from Shadowstrike AU in the Guild Angles continues to dominate with a DPS of 1,203.6, maintaining this top position for over a week now. Close behind is Wayne Warlock from Shengming La Yan TW in the Guild Changnuo, delivering a DPS of 1,169.4. Rounding out the top 3 is a Maeto from Lone Wolf US, with a DPS of 1,160.7. The remaining top 10 are Pantslock, Strawberry, Demons, Benzalalak, Firamatic, Zhonggo Dong, and Matre, all showcasing impressive performances. In the Tank Warlock category, Enigmzexcax from Living Flame EU in the Guild Pepitent maintains the top position with a DPS of 1,045.0, holding this spot for over a week now. Coming in second is Lobster from Living Flame US in the Guild Mud Hut Elite with a DPS of 1,040.2. The third spot goes to Gianrandomdo from Godohanugde KR in the Guild Eelrenegib, posting a DPS of 1,021.1. The remaining top 10 players for today, in descending order, are Dinosaur, Gigapro Max, Barot, TikToxic, Kyrek Meta, Locktank, and Havoc. In the Fury Warrior category, Sapato from Lone Wolf EU in the Guild Ego continues to dominate with a DPS of 1,801.5, holding the top spot for over a week now. Mogpio from Godohanugde KR in the Guild Eelrenegib follows closely with a DPS of 1,658.9. Subtamaya from Living Flame EU in the Guild Pepitent made a leap to the top 3 today with a DPS of 1,656.1. The remaining top 10 for today are Jia Qi Ge, Esispda, Alondo, Daju Liang, Bishka, and Barbala. In the Protection Warrior category, Suffrix from Crusader Strike US in the Guild Exhausted continues to hold the top spot with a DPS of 1,453.2, maintaining this position for the past 3 days. In second place, we have Bodil from Lone Wolf US in the Guild Lethal with a DPS of 1,436.3. Rounding out the top 3 is Butane from Godohanugde KR in the Guild Eelrenegib, who held the top spot until 3 days ago with a DPS of 1,418.9. The remaining top 10 for today are Threat, Agony, Kabir, Duo Luasiju, Inzaki, Mani, and Oli.